I'm Michelle Robart from the TMC Newsroom, and I'm here with Rich Tehrani. So, Rich, today there's news for Nortel. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Big Nortel news today, yes. I'll give you a little overview of just Nortel's history before we go into the news. This is a company that's always been very well regarded in terms of technology. They've made some unbelievable strides in terms of relationships, especially with Microsoft and Unified Communications. Later, they made some big announcements with IBM. So, a company that on the enterprise side seems to be doing fairly well. They've got their act relatively well together, and on the service provider side, they've got some challenges. They also have the legacy history of having some financial scandals in their past, going back about 5-6 years, where there was some fraud, and the company has been trying to recover from that, and has done an okay job recovering. But now that we're heading into a slower economy, Nortel's got the challenges of dealing with this slow economy and figuring out where they're going to go from here.
Well, that's interesting. So, what exactly happened in the news today?
Well, the Wall Street Journal mentioned that Nortel is exploring a possible bankruptcy, which is not a big shock to anyone who's seen their debt. And the latest numbers in the debt that I've seen peg it at $6 billion or thereabouts, and that's obviously a lot of unified communication systems to sell to get to that level, and it's the service provider business that's the challenge.
Well, that's a large amount of debt for them to try to, get through, and especially in a hard time like today. So it's rough
Yes.
for the company.
Yes, and they're cutting costs, and analysts have cited the fact that their CDMA systems are legacy, and they're not selling as many of them as they would like, and the cost cutting that they're doing is not sufficient. And to me, I mean, I can't think of just a worse scenario for a lot of the good people at Nortel, and I know a lot of people who are employed at Nortel that are really good at their jobs in technology and in marketing and in other spaces that seem to be stuck in a tough situation.
So tell us about the CDMA systems.
Well, they're older technology, and service providers are generally spending money on the wireless side. I mean, if anything, that's the one area that is the most resistant to a slow economy, but they're generally spending money on newer technology, and so that puts Nortel in kind of a tough spot. And even when they are spending money, they are obviously being more pragmatic, and they're being more cautious about their spend, and they're also being very careful to play the equipment providers against each other. And what that means is basically a classic margin squeeze. So if you're going to sell something, you're going to sell it with reduced margins, and if you're not selling, you're in trouble. So really, no matter what situation happens, you're in trouble. And companies that don't have cash at this time and have debt are the ones that are going to have the most difficulty navigating through these financial markets.
Who exactly is Mike Zafarovsky? Is that how you
Zafarovsky, yes. He is the CEO of the company, came from Motorola. I've heard Mike speak a few times. I've never had the opportunity to speak with him personally, and my sources on the inside and throughout the industry tell me that Mike is a very good numbers guy, and he's not in tune with the technology as much as he possibly could be. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because Nortel's filled with techies and engineers. The question is the combination of Mike Zafarovsky and all these technologists enough to get through this tough spot? And I've always said, and I've been shocked, having been in telecom literally my entire life, that Nortel is such a well-regarded company. If you know the products and you know the people, and you see just the total amount of just brains or techies or nerds or geeks or engineers or whatever you want to call them, they're really talented people. But on the outside, Nortel has never been very good at consistently conveying a message of being a major player in the communications and tech space. So as what happens so often in technology, at the head of a company, you've got potentially a technologist or you've got a financial person who doesn't necessarily understand the branding issues of of a company and doesn't understand how important that is. And I contrast Nortel, that has a lot of good people and a lot of really good speakers and a lot of good writers. And we've got Tony Ribb, for example, is a blogger for TMC Net, and he's got some of the best talent or best content that I've ever seen, out of any industry writer. And that's all very well and good, but sometimes you need to have a charismatic CEO who can explain to large audiences why his company has the best products and his company has products that customers need to buy. And so I think that is a challenge for a lot of companies. And Mark Benioff over at Salesforce.com is one of the best evangelists for an industry and for a company that I have ever seen. He's accessible, and he understands the technology, and he puts it in layman's terms, and he's a showman, and he's really got a good combination of attributes that every company needs. And there are very few people like that, but Nortel needs one of those types of people to be at the head, to assuming they can navigate through this economic environment. They need someone like that to really tell the world why everybody needs to be buying Nortel systems. And I can tell you, just as an aside, there are other companies that for the last 2 to 2.5 years have special programs aimed primarily at cannibalizing Nortel customers. They see Nortel as weak right now, and they've been going after the Nortel customer base. And I know about that because companies obviously share marketing plans with us because we're involved in helping communications companies market. So I've yet to see that with other companies. I've seen companies target Nortel exclusively. So that tells you that there's been a smell of blood in the water for a few years now.
So you're saying maybe they should just get a new CEO and everything will be better?
Well, it's similar to the financial situation that we're in. Well, let's equate this to the presidency. We're going to have a new president, and we'll have him early next year, but it doesn't mean that as soon as the new president comes in, things are going to get better. When you've got this amount of debt and when there's talk of bankruptcy at any company, there is obviously large amounts of fear that permeate throughout an industry. And so companies that were going to buy from Nortel are now going to consider putting those purchases on a hold. That's just the way it works. So even if Mike Zafarovsky is the best CEO in the world, the reality is that it's going to be very tough to convince people to buy from Nortel unless there are big changes that happen at the company. So what I should say is that some changes need to happen at Nortel to instill more confidence in the investor community as well as the buying community. Generally, those types of changes are changes of top management. We saw it with Patricia Russo over at Alcatel-Lucent. When she stepped down, there was more optimism in the company, and people thought it would be better for the company, and the stock did enjoy a brief gain. So the answer there is, generally speaking, when you have this situation, heads roll, and usually the heads at the top are the ones that are the most vulnerable. There's been talk of a bailout, so there may just be a bailout, and maybe Mike keeps his job. It'll just be like Detroit, and at least at this moment, and everyone keeps their job, and everything's fine. So it's a little soon to know, but I'd say that I'd say it's at least 50-50 that Zafarovsky's going.
Really? Well, that could be big news when it breaks. We'll have to cover it here when it does happen. I'm Michelle Robart from the TMC Newsroom.
And I'm Rich Tehrani. Thank you very much for watching.